a lot of times these different parts of us are created from wounding experiences that we had when we were really young. We like they fracture off from the whole of ourselves when they're going through a really hard thing.
Here we go, Rising Man family. I have one of my most beloved brothers and friends in the world, and I genuinely mean that when I say it, Mr. Jack Star Rubin, coming in all the way from Asheville, North Carolina, my bro. Honored to have you on here for a repeat performance, man. How you doing today?
Oh, thank you so much, Jeddy. I'm doing really well. This is exciting and just fun. Every time I see your face, a smile comes comes to my face. So it's an honor and a privilege and exciting and fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Well, it's very mutual, and we decided that it would be a great opportunity since number one, you've been on the show before, and number two, we've known each other since college, going back to, I don't know, maybe I was 20 years old when I met you, and I'm going to be 35 this year. So 15 years of relationship. That's a lot of years, man. That's a long time.
Yes, it is. It's kind of crazy to think about, but
Yeah.
come a long way.
And here we are now. I've got two kids. You've got a kid, both married, businesses, all the whole nine yards. So why don't we start off with a walk down memory lane? I figured it'd be a good opportunity for us to go back to what life used to look like back in our old stomping grounds of NYC. This is only 10 years ago, man. I've been in California for 10 years now, a little under 10 years. And let's start with this question. What was I like 10 years ago for those people who didn't know me back then?
Wow.
Be ruthless.
I just loved you so much, man. It just was, you were one of the most fun, exciting people to hang out with. It was just, I just remember just smiling all the time when I was around you and just feeling like we would have some just conversations that made me feel really alive and really excited and passionate about life and opening my eyes to like what life potentially could become and what could be and like what we could do in our lives. So, no idea that it would turn into this, but I remember sitting on a curb with you one time, just talking about what about this, and we could do this and this could happen. And what about that? And we could help people in this way and this, and just, it was so fun spitballing it back and forth. It just was really inspiring and enlivening for me.
So first of all, thank you for saying that. And what were we talking about at that time when we wanted to help people, but what was our vision of helping people at that time on that curb?
Yeah, I don't remember it super well, but I think, realizing that human beings struggle in a lot of different ways, and maybe we could help, maybe we could help humanity, help the world, help our planet, and we're just kind of brainstorming different ways that maybe we could be of service to make this world a more beautiful and better and less painful existence.
Yeah, man, that definitely sounds familiar to me. Going back to when we first met, so many of our initial conversations were about how can we make this world a better place? How can we help people? How can we help others? How can we help our community? I think what we were missing at that time, at least what I was missing at that time, is the realization that I needed to help myself first. There was a lot all the ambition and the heartfelt intentions of helping people and helping the world was there, but there was a lot of work I needed to do on myself. And at 23 years old, romping around the city with all of these ambitious ideas, there was so much I needed to do on myself. And I think the same was true for a lot of our friends in that community. We wanted to make a difference, but we skipped a step. It was like we forgot to take care of steps 1 through 4 before jump into step 5.
Absolutely. And another amazing thing I remember about you at that time anyway, is that I got like that, what you just said, like thrust in my face pretty intensely. I was pretty passionate about music and being a musician at that time. And I ended up slamming into this chronic wrist injury, which well, and it was just like stopped me in my tracks. And I was just angry and frustrated and scared and didn't know what to do. And it just really forced me to be like, all right, I'm going to have to like look at this and try to figure out what's going on here. And, just forever grateful to you, because you were somebody who was just so there for me. I had the story of like, oh God, now that I can't play music, like, what am I? I'm nothing. Who could love me? One of my friends aren't going to like hanging out with me anymore, because like this thing that is me is taken away from me. and you were just super loving and supportive and helpful and kind and compassionate. And it really was a huge part of my healing journey. So forever grateful for that.
Well, I think it's such a great dynamic because I think we, in some regards, we both feel like we got the better end of the deal. There's so many moments I could think about my musicianship. A lot of people don't know this about me, but we recorded an album together 10 years ago and released it. In fact, I should probably put it out there again for the Rising Man community. I haven't posted about that in a while, but you helped bring the artist out of me with the way that you were with music, and watching you and our other friends in New York at the time, being a part of a band with you and just having fun in New York. I have some great memories of performing up in Harlem together at some random bars and watching you guys perform on different stages and being a big part of that journey. But some of my most fond memories of you were just how simple you were able to make your life back then. You were just about your practices, taking care of, when eventually it became about taking care of your wrist, but you were so dedicated and devoted to your meditative practice, your spiritual and personal exploration, your musicianship, and becoming a wild guitarist, man, just so passionate in the way you did that. And even beyond that, just the exploration of the human being within yourself and within others. That's how I remember you, even going all the way back to those times when, let's see, if I was 23, that would make you 21. Right, living in New York City. One of my favorite memories, this goes way back in the archives, but just when we used to get high and we used to make music together and go on some really beautiful journeys in that capacity, and you inviting me to just let music pour out of me. One of the first most uncomfortable memories I have of, because then my own story of perfectionism and how can I put something together that people are going to like and that I'm going to like, that's going to sound really groovy. And I give a lot of credit to you, man, for awakening the music in me. And so that's one of my favorite memories, man, going all the way back to Windseeker, the first song that we recorded together back then. It was a really special moment for me.
Yeah, wow. Those are some of the most beautiful memories for me also. And, you mentioned about like these conversations we got into of like helping the world and this and that. I remember, I remember thinking about you when we were playing music together and your voice started to come out more and more and more. I was like, oh, this guy's my ticket to the top right here. Just play guitar for him and everything. It's an easy street to stardom and all of that stuff. But which was really what I wanted for a long time. Being a famous musician I was very passionate about. And getting hurt helped me start to realize that there was a lot more to existence, and suffering was like actually a really big deal. Like that I hadn't really come across in my life, very fortunate in my early years, but I hadn't really come across deep suffering of like losing something that you're so passionate about, and started to come face to face with like feeling not lovable and shame and pain and fear and anxiety and stress for the first times in my life, and starting to realize, oh, wow, there's like something to be addressed here in humanity, and maybe actually looking at this both for myself first, and then starting to realize that actually maybe if I actually start to like put my energies towards helping people with this, that's going to be a lot deeper and more important than just another famous musician. And I love musicians, and I still love musician kind of thing, but I just realized there was something greater that was being called of me and asked of me kind of thing. And grateful to have followed that. And I've really seen that in you also, in your journey.
Well, it's the thing that they say, the source of your pain becomes the source of your medicine that you have to give. And I think that your story in a really beautiful and even poetic way captures that, just watching the way that you translated your great adversity with your wrist pain and turned it into a big chunk of the way that you give back to people now. So we covered a lot of that in our first interview. So for people who have never, maybe these are guys tuning into the podcast who haven't been around for a while, you should definitely go back and check out the first interview I had with Jack, probably almost 2 years ago now, where we really articulated your journey through chronic pain in your wrist, discovering Alexander technique and these other principles of releasing tension in the body that became such a cornerstone for your work. But I want to build from there, since we've already had a conversation about that. And the theme that I'm hearing just in our little walk down memory lane here is identifying adversity and challenge at any stage of life, and having the awareness to see it as an opportunity. And this for me has become such an important mantra. I think it's one of the core pieces that I bring into my coaching and my work with people is, yeah, you're in it right now, but if you can bring enough attention and intention to it, this can be the first paragraph in the greatest comeback story ever. Right? It's so much of our ability to heal and overcome adversity is the story and the narrative that we put together from the circumstances in front of us. And so I've seen you do that a number of times in the past 15 years of relationship before we even knew what we were doing. And I know you've witnessed me go through those myself. And very recently, you helped me through one of the most challenging periods in my entire adult life, talking about the winter of 2021 is how I'll always remember it, these past 4 months. And so I just want to drop into that for a little bit and really talk about how you supported me. Let's start with your perspective on things. When I hit you up, I remember exactly where I was outside the coffee shop, probably like 3-4 months ago. And I told you that I was in bad shape. What was your impression and experience of me from the outside looking in?
My main impression was just, two main things anyway. I laughed because one of my impressions was like, oh my gosh, I have felt very similar to this with my own experience not too long ago, kind of thing. So I felt just a lot of resonance and tremendous, like my heart going out to you, an outpouring of just like, oh man, like I have felt similar things to what Jeddy's sharing with me, and know what that is like, and feeling my heart really going out to you. And yeah, just a feeling very touched, that you did reach out to me, to share that with me. And it felt like you were so helpful to me when I was really struggling at several periods of my life, kind of thing. So I just felt really honored and touched to, that you were reaching out to me for help, that I could, be there for you in that way.
Let's spotlight that for a second. That's so good for me to hear again, and for men to hear out there. It was an honor for you to have me reach out to you for help.
I felt very honored.
One of the first voices that we get in our heads is, oh, I don't want to be a burden. Oh, I don't want to hoist my problems onto somebody else. He's doing so good right now. I don't want to bring him down. Those voices of the ego that talk us out of facing off with our challenges and exposing ourselves to someone else, even somebody that I love and trust so much. Right. I definitely had that resistance. I'm like, oh, should I really reach out to Jack right now? He's got a lot going on. He's got a little kid. He's building his business. Right. And so I just want to spotlight that, because that's one of the key things is if you were wearing the other person's shoes and you received a call from somebody, hey, I need help, and I think you're the person who could really help me out. How easy is it for us to show up for somebody else? Right. It's like you said, an honor. It's an honor. But when I'm in that position of pain and discomfort, it's not always easy to see it that way.
Definitely. It definitely can take a lot of courage. And for you, what is like what do you think is the root of, I better not reach out to this person, or like, what do you think is going on there? The trepidation.
Well, truthfully, I can honestly and confidently say that I've exercised this muscle so much that story doesn't have as strong of a grip on me. Actually, this time around, even though it was a really, really challenging time for me, I knew I needed to reach out. And you were one of about 40 people. I like went ham with how I reached out for help, because I was in a bad spot. So honestly, it wasn't as difficult as it has been in the past, but historically, for me, it's at the root of it, it's what is this person going to think about me when I tell them how I've quote unquote fucked up? What are they going to think about me when I reveal how irresponsible my decision making has been, or how negligent I've been of myself, of my family, whatever the circumstances are? Mostly it's, what is the other person going to think about me? And then it's also, what am I going to think about me when I say these things out loud? Because right now it's all just a problem living in my head. That's usually what comes up for me first. Is it similar for you when you have that same obstacle?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely, as you said, that's what's going on in the head. I noticed kind of before, a lot of times I don't even have the awareness of what's going on in my head. And I just feel this kind of shut down quality, like go into the turtle shell, which sometimes can be really valuable for me to take some time to go into my turtle shell. I'm more of an introverted person, but I do think that I have a tendency to err on the side of that, or maybe not err on the side of it, but it's just, that's the easy one for me. And that a lot of times opening up there, as you said, there's a shame component. I kind of think, it's like, I shouldn't be feeling this way is a big one that comes up. And so I share about it, then I have to let people know that I'm doing this thing that I shouldn't be doing or experiencing or struggling with. Um, so yeah, it does take a lot of courage.
Yeah, agreed, man. It is so much of a somatic experience in the body, right? It's that discomfort. I can think of the tightness, the tensing, the clenching, the contraction of my body, elevated heart rate, a lot of the physiological effects that I can often feel when it's like when you're building up the courage, completely unrelated, but when you're going to go and approach somebody and ask them out, telling them that, hey, I'm attracted to you, I'd love to spend time. That feeling in the body is very similar to the same feeling I have when I'm getting ready to tell somebody something really vulnerable.
Yeah, and I imagine it's a fear of rejection piece, because there is the rejection. If I share this vulnerable thing with these people about how I'm not perfect, am I going to be rejected?
That's the other thing. Exactly. Right. Like, how am I should know better. And also, I'm unique. I must be the only person who's ever gone through this before. And that's another way that my ego will convince me to not share it with that person. Right. Well, they've clearly aren't going through this and wouldn't understand. And they probably would look at me funny thinking, hey, you can't figure out your finances. Like, what's wrong with you? Right. And I've never had anybody actually say that to me. So it's interesting how we contrive these stories in our heads.
Absolutely. And more what I've found is actually that's, by actually making ourselves vulnerable, that's like the best. There's certain things you can kind of work through on your own. Sometimes maybe that are easier to work through on your own. But for me, there's been many, many things in my life that it was absolutely imperative that I talk to somebody about it or didn't hide it or shared it with someone. And only I would like spin my tires in a very aggressive, frustrated, disillusioned kind of manner, trying to solve it on my own because I was afraid of telling anybody about X, Y, or Z. But when I was able to actually open up about it and share with someone, then all of a sudden things started moving pretty quickly.
Well, that's the ironic part, right? As soon as we start talking about it, that monster in my head just shrinks down to a little puppy. It's like not scary at all anymore. At least it tends to diminish a lot of the fear factor. So let's go in a little bit deeper. Speaking specifically, and I've mentioned this on other podcast episodes recently, a huge source of the challenges that I was going through this winter was truly a rite of passage. I was truly facing off with just about every layer of my life, my personal health, my spiritual life, my work and my career moving forward, my relationship with Carrie, my financial situation currently and moving into the future, the way I'm showing up as a father. Every domain of my life was presenting itself to me at this time, which is why I think it felt so overwhelming. If it was any one of those things at one time, not such a big deal, but it was all kind of mounting on me. And one of the first things that you really helped me to uncover was, what are the voices in my head actually saying? From a really beautiful and non-confrontational place of curiosity, just guiding me through, well, that's interesting. What does that voice have to say? What if that voice were to speak? What would it say? And I don't know what terminology you use, but just biolocating, like kind of like geography in my body. Where is that voice coming from and what does it want to say? Was a really helpful tool. And obviously, just quick disclaimer, you are a certified therapist. You do work on these strategies with people that you work with one-on-one. It's not something that we would recommend anybody to do independently or on their own, right? Better under the guise of a professional. Let's just say that. But what can you say a little bit more about those techniques and strategies, and on a simple, for anybody who has not experienced that, what that's actually doing for us?
Yeah. So just to kind of give a overall sense of things, I learned about it from several different things, but I got into like trauma resolution trainings, whatnot. And I originally got into somatic experiencing, which was really, really helpful. But then I got into this thing called internal family systems, comes from the parts psychology idea that we're actually made up. Each individual person is made up of like sub personalities, or parts as they call it, that we have kind of like different people living inside of us. It seems bizarre. It seems strange, but that we all kind of have multiple personalities. And a lot of times these different parts of us are created from wounding experiences that we had when we were really young. They fracture off from the whole of ourselves when they're going through a really hard thing. And then they're at work and they're actually these like frightened, wounded, burdened, sometimes traumatized parts of us are still with us. So there could be like a hard thing we went through when we were like 8 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old. And then that part will just like take the front and center experience of our life and take over everything. And we'll be kind of acting from that place, or at least we'll be hearing that voice really loud in our heads. And if you can actually go in there and ask what's going on, as if it was a person, hey, I see that you're really concerned about something or you're frightened about something. Do you want to tell us what's going on for you? A lot of times those parts will tell you exactly what's going on for them, what they're really stressed out about and why they're so stressed out about it and what might have happened at an early age that, spooked it so much. And if you just hear from them, a lot of times the wind in their sails settles down because they've got a chance to be heard. They're just like people. So they're like, oh, you listened to me. Like, great. Now I feel a lot better. And a lot of times that energy subsides a lot. And then it's a lot easier to come back into what they call in that modality, the self-leader that's able to be like, okay, now I can see clearly again what was going to be best for me and the whole of who I am. And so a lot of times people spend a lot of energy trying to get rid of fear. I got to just like not think about that, just shut up and like, I got to power through and experience this. And what tends to happen to those parts is they just get louder and louder and louder because nobody likes to get, be swept aside, particularly when they're really frightened. They'll just be like, okay, you're not listening to me when I talk at this volume, then I'm going to start talking to you at a really, really loud volume because you're not paying any attention to me. But when you turn and face them and start to listen to them, they're like, thank you. This is what I've needed. I've needed someone to be there for me and listen to me. So we actually learn how we can really take care of ourselves and be there for ourselves and heal ourselves and heal our own wounds.
And for you and I, and those of us who are listening, who are parents, that this is not much different than how you have to be with a child, especially a small child that does exactly. If you just go back and listen to what Jack said and substitute the voice as a child, like your son or your daughter, it's very, very similar. It's our children are requesting our attention when there's a need, and they find ways to get louder when those needs aren't met. And as soon as those needs are met with what they require in that moment, then there's resolution. And so when you're guiding me through this process, the visual that comes to my mind, maybe it's because I have a school bus and I'm a bus daddy, but I think about myself driving a school bus, and I've got a busload of kids sitting in the different benches. And at certain times, those children will come up and they'll start like running up and down the aisles trying to get my attention. And I think of Chris Farley back in Billy Madison, the school bus driver, just getting all stressed out and anxious. When what's really needed of me in that moment is to continue to drive the bus, right? And metaphorically speaking, to continue moving forward in my life with awareness and intention, but to still be able to devote the attention necessary to acknowledge that part of me that's represented by that child and figure out what it needs. And then once that need is reconciled, then all right, we can just get back to cruising on the road again.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said. And a great analogy to the Chris Farley thing. Hopefully trying to bring a little bit of a calmer, more compassionate, loving
just think of the eyes bulging out of the head and the red tomato face. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's the interesting thing is when you start talking to these parts, sometimes it feels like they're just like blocking you in every single way that you want to move forward in your life. You're like, I have to get rid of these parts because they're blocking me from what I'm really passionate about. They're interfering with like my life in all of these different ways. This fear and this stress is like interfering. But what you actually start to find when you actually listen to these parts, and I've found this over and over again, both inside of myself and with people that I've worked with, is that none of the parts of us want to interfere with what we're passionate about. They all want to be on the team. They want to support the team. They want to, more than anything, to be like a valued, supportive member of the team. They just feel like they can't because they have some burden or wound that's unresolved. And they can't do the job of the team because they're so stressed out by X, Y, or Z, that wound that they are still holding on to, a burden that is still like embedded into their system, that they can't work for the team very well.
That's so beautifully said, man. That's such an important point to make. And for anybody who's hearing about this, or these are new concepts for you to think about, imagining that, like you said, a team, right? So let's take that school bus full of children, and let's say it's a school bus full of football players from a local high school, and they're all getting ready to go and try to beat up on the crosstown rival. And the only way that that's going to happen is if the team is functioning as a unit, as a whole. And if one of those players is not feeling well, they're not feeling like a part of the team, not feeling accepted or welcomed or supported by his teammates, it's going to have an immediate impact on the overall success of that team. So thinking of myself as the team, right? Each of us. And I love the movie Inside Out. Anybody who hasn't seen the movie Inside Out, I think is such a beautiful portrayal of how these different voices and personality parts we have can interact and collaborate and communicate and sometimes interfere with each other, seemingly. It's so important to figure out how to get those parts online. And I've worked with kids for so long, so I know that it's such an easy dynamic to look at. How do you get kids all operating and working together, because they're so instinctual, they're so impulsive, and the needs are so raw. They're so raw and so honest. And I think it's just such a simple way for people to start looking at these different things that are happening internally within us.
Absolutely. And just as far as this family piece that you're sharing about how you would speak to your kids kind of thing, for anybody who's listening with kids, Jeddy mentioned how like you should kind of do this with the trained professional or this or that, these parts listenings. It can be really valuable to do it with trained professionals and whatnot, but you can certainly start to play around with it on your own without having to really worry about anything. If you just start to think about how are you treating yourself, like if you notice that there's a part of you that's feeling really afraid, bringing your awareness towards that part and just see how do you treat yourself for the fact that you're feeling really afraid. And if you have any kids, just compare it to how you would treat your kid if your kid was really frightened about, something that was important, going to their first day of school or something. Would you tell them like, get the hell over it? Like, what's the matter with you? Like, go in there. Some people maybe would do that, but would that be the healthiest thing for that child? Is that going to make that child feel safer and like, able to get, feel comfortable and learn to be safe going to school? Probably not. They're probably going to start to develop some issues, because of that, not feeling loved by their parent, not feeling supported, not feeling like it's okay that they're really frightened in this moment, that they're going to start to maybe feel like there's something wrong with them. And that's exactly what happens to these parts of us. They feel like there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be with this. I shouldn't be like this. Look at the way that, Jack is, treating me, or there's something they start to get these stories in their head that there's something really, really wrong. And then they start to act out just like a kid and cause lots of problems internally in our nervous system.
And that's a really great segue into another tool that you brought into our work together. And I'll be honest, I was so resistant to this one, and you could share the story of what was coming up for me. I was really honest about it with you, but this mindful self-compassion. Here, I'll just say my piece first. Sure. Self-compassion as a term is something that immediately used to, not even that long ago, just a few months ago, create a trigger in me. And through some unraveling and some curiosity and inquiry that you led me through, on realizing that I had a story about self-compassion, self-love, all these buzzwords that we hear today in the personal development world, that those were words that were going to get me to just become a big softie. And the green light, yellow light, red light system, which I'm going to ask you to describe in more detail in a second, was so helpful for me, because I feel like it really helped me find the sweet spot between the whip and the roses. The part of myself that can, be really disciplined and really on my edge to drive and push forward, which is way more comfortable for me. And the roses, which is a little bit more of this like gentle, going with the flow, giving my body plenty of time and space, that I was terrified to go into, and it's still challenging for me, but realizing that there needed to be some balance there, because there was a part of me, one of those kids on my bus, was suffering because I was always pulling out the whip. I was always pulling out the whip, to the point where I was giving the whip to one of those little children on my bus and letting that little child whip all the other kids. It was so anyway, I'll pause there for a minute, man, because it's been such a helpful tool, and I'd love for you to just give a little bit of an intro of what that is, and how did you introduce that to me?
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely speak to that, but I just have a question for you quick. I'm curious, the part of you sound like you have a part, one of the people on the bus was getting really triggered by the idea of like hanging out with the roses, and like giving your body as much time as it needs and being gentle with yourself. Wondering if you'd be open to sharing what was particularly evocative or triggering for at least that part of you.
It was all the fear that I would become lazy, I would lose motivation, I would ultimately fail my family and not be able to provide and produce for them. It was, there were many layers to that story. Just in the interest of time, it was really those
Sure.
top bullet points. Was I was terrified that if I gave myself any leeway, that I would become this lazy, sitting on the couch watching Netflix for hours and hours every night, deadbeat father husband, which that was a very legitimate viewpoint that I thought, a very legitimate idea of a future I thought would happen even if I just let up on myself a little bit.
Definitely. I appreciate you sharing that. And that makes total sense, because such a huge priority is to take care of your family and to be successful at what you're passionate about building.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, just an example, when you actually start asking questions of these like parts that are getting triggered inside of ourselves, they typically make a lot of sense. Sometimes they don't make sense at first because they're speaking really loudly or they're just like, running amok inside kind of thing. But as soon as you start to turn your affectionate listening ear towards them and pay attention to what's going on for them, sometimes they have to just kind of like let out a lot of anger or frustration or grief or fear or whatever it is for a while. But then at a certain point, it starts to become clear what's really going on for them. And it always tends to make sense. And out of that tends to be born internal self-compassion. You start to be like, oh, there's a reason why I'm feeling this way or why this is happening internally. So you don't have to like engineer. A lot of people with self-compassion, they're like, I try to say nice things to myself and it just bounces off me. You have to like engineer it, but you don't have to. If you just listen to yourself until it makes sense what's actually going on, why these parts are so frightened, then all of a sudden compassion is born, because compassion is innate in human beings when you see suffering and when you understand what suffering is going on. It springs forward very easily in other people because it's easier to understand sometimes. And you have that space, but when it's happening in ourselves, it can be harder to see what's actually going on for ourselves. But anyway, that was a digression.
Well, I'll just speak to that real quick, and then we'll bounce it back to you. That was the key for me. Is there was no way in the state that I was in that I was going to make enough time and space to really listen to what that part of myself had to say. I didn't have access to compassion in that moment for that part of myself. And that's where I really needed somebody else. So I go back to what you said before, that, yeah, sure, maybe you don't need a professional to begin some of this inquiry, but if you're in a heavy spot like I was, or even something close to it, you might not be able to access that compassion. Sometimes these stories are like sealed iron vaults, and it's almost impossible to find your own way through. Maybe if you've done a lot of this work over many, many years, that you can access it a little bit easier. I'm sure that happens too.
Definitely. And one of the most complicated things about it with this multiple parts situation is that a lot of times what happens, the compassion is being blocked by another part. So we have one part that's feeling a particular thing, feeling a lot of fear, for instance, and then there'll be another part of us that jumps up that's terrified of that other part, like causing problems. And so it maybe doesn't reveal itself as fear. What it reveals itself as deep anger and extremely mean self-talk towards that part of like, what the hell is wrong with you? Get your shit together. What's the matter with you? Like, this is not okay, putting tremendous pressure on it. And so there's no way there's going to be any compassion if another part is taking over with like hatred for another part, which happens all the time. And so then you got to go over there and listen to what's going on for that other part. And usually you find that there's fear over there also.
It's just like a kid bullying another kid on the bus, right?
Brothers and sisters, or kid on the bus, all of that stuff.
It's not innate in us to bully someone else, right? It's always a source of our own process. And when you watch two kids in this dynamic happening, that's why I think it's such a great metaphor, because you know that there's more happening, and with some attention, really, I think it's just attention. If we just use the word attention for what that can represent, so much of the conflict, even if it's just internal conflict, can be reconciled with attention, time, space, breath, listening, slowing down, which when I'm in a survival state, the last thing that I do is slow down. That's why I knew I needed you to help me out, because you've been helping me slow down since I was back in New York City, man. Racing around on the subways.
Yeah, at least in my experience, a lot of times time and space is exactly what is necessary to actually be able to hear. You have to actually turn your attention inward and actually listen to what's going on in there. And listening takes giving ourselves space. When we just are in a go, go, go kind of mode, you can't hear what's going on in there. And it just sounds like noise or symptomology, anxiety, depression, chronic issues, really all sorts of things, until you start to untangle the knot that has been created internally. But anyway, I know you asked about this this green, yellow, red zone situation.
Yes, let's get back to that, please.
Yeah. So the idea with the green, yellow, red zone is, some people call it the safety zone, the challenge zone, and the overwhelm zone. And this was introduced to me through the Mindful Self-Compassion Institute, and it's really changed my life dramatically. And certainly can share more about that. But the idea that the safety zone is like when you're just feeling good and you're feeling calm and you're feeling safe and you're chilling, life is easy kind of thing. Challenge zone is when you're on the edge. You feel the edginess, you feel some stress, some healthy stress arising, when you're trying to take steps in your life where you are being brave and showing up and putting yourself out there. That all tends to bring some challenge zone experiences. And then, as well as a whole bunch of other things in life, because life is challenging. And then there's the red zone, overwhelm zone, when we just are feeling flooded and overwhelmed and triggered and, can't be present and all these different things. And just having the awareness to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, what zone am I in right now? And depending on what zone I'm in, that will dictate what is going to be the most self-compassionate act that will support me in the particular moment. So I know one of the things that you said was hard for you about self-compassion, or was triggering, was this idea that self-compassion was you just have to always be super gentle to yourself, no matter what, in every single situation. But what is actually the case is that if you are in the easy zone, the green zone, and actually giving yourself some putting some fire, or throwing some logs on the fire to try to get it to like rise up again by trying to encourage yourself and motivate yourself, that might be exactly what you need to get yourself into the challenge zone. Get the reins, or crack the whip a little bit on yourself. Maybe another analogy might be a little more optimal, but to try to light the fire up a little bit, kind of thing.
I think motivation, right? Like motivation, healthy yourself. Motivation. Yeah.
Healthy motivation. Thanks. I think that's a good way of saying it. And then if you're in the red zone and you're super overwhelmed, then trying to motivate yourself, which is what most of us tend to do, is by getting really hard on ourselves. Come on, what's the matter with you? I shouldn't be in this place. Like, what am I, weak? Like, get over it. Like, keep going. Why are you so afraid? All these different things, tends to just stress us out even more, kind of thing, overwhelm us even more, kind of thing. So at that moment, being really kind and gentle to yourself, to be like, wow, I'm really stressed out, and maybe I need some help to try to get me back down to the yellow zone or the green zone, so that I can recuperate and let my nervous system quiet down again, now is really what's typically needed in those situations.
And one of the things that was super helpful for me, because I'm a classic red zoner. If it hasn't been made obvious already, I'm a classic red light, red zoner. That's where I learned. You helped me see that that's just something I've really leaned on to survive and succeed in my life. It's been really useful in a lot of places in my life I can point to where it's been really effective. The whole basis and foundation for Rising Man was created from a long period of red zoning for myself, which had consequences and costs to my personal health and how I felt about myself. And like I mentioned before, my resistance wasn't going to the green zone. One of the first things you helped me see, and you didn't just tell me this, but you helped me see it for myself, which is also so great about the way you do your work, is that none of these zones are inherently bad or wrong. There's no zone that is better than the others. And that was the story I had. I had a story that it's all red, maybe yellow sometimes, but don't even consider going into the green, because you're going to be screwed. And just considering that for a moment and actually giving myself an opportunity to try it on, I don't remember if you encouraged me to do it or if I came to this deduction myself, but there were some days where I said, okay, I'm going to consciously choose to give myself some green zone time. I'm going to take care of the most important thing for the day. But if I feel like taking a nap, I'm going to take a nap and then see what happens. Because the fear was, well, if I lay down and take a nap, then everything's going to fall off a cliff. And then I allowed myself to do it, took a nap, woke up, felt really good. And lo and behold, the world was still spinning. And that evidence gave me more reinforcement that, okay, well, I can choose to go in and out of these different zones if I'm really listening to what I need in that moment, and trusting that I'm not just deceiving myself.
Yeah. I think that's really beautiful is a lot of times when there's like parts that are really resistant or afraid of something, just trying it a little bit and seeing what happens is a great way to go, not to throw yourself into the red zone of just like, all right, I'm going to take 2 weeks off and do nothing now. That sounds like it's kind of overwhelming on the other side. That'll be green zone that throws you back into the red zone, which was something that we spoke about. But instead to just try a little bit of something and see, is that okay? Did the world end, or was that actually healthy for me? And then kind of systematically dialing in what is actually going to be more skillful for your well-being. Because my journey, well, the reason I got into mindful self-compassion, why it was so necessary in my life was once I started trying to build a business on my own, I thought I was struggling with it and I was experiencing a lot of fear and resistance and procrastination. And I thought the way I needed to handle that was to be really, really hard on myself and try to like blow through the brick wall that was like up in my nervous system. Cause I had parts of me that were so frightened and terrified. And I tried to just like blow through it by being hard. And a part of me was so frightened of like financial insecurity and all this stuff and feeling like I'm a failure. And what if I can't make this happen? And what does that mean about me? I had some tremendous fears as it started to just it was like my brain got tuned to a radio station that was just saying, can I swear on the podcast?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah,
it was saying like, this was literally what was going on in my head, like for hours at a time. I'd be like, you're a fucking piece of shit. What the fuck is wrong with you? You fucking loser, douchebag. I fucking hate you. What's wrong with you? Just like constant. And sometimes I would fall asleep. It was like hard to fall asleep when this is pumping into my brain. I would wake up and it would still be going. It was like the radio station was still going. And it was like wearing me down to the point I was like having trouble getting out of bed. It was really, really intense. And I was like freaked out. And then gratefully, I like started getting into the self-compassion thing. And then eventually found the internal family systems things to find that there was a part of me that was just so stressed out and frightened because I was like, why is this part so mean? It's so freaking mean to me. But it was so terrified and it felt like it's the way that it knew to try to like solve the problem. But what was happening, it was making the problem a lot worse kind of thing, which happens all the time to us. And so by learning to listen to that part, see what was going on and try to bring some compassion and love to it. And the rest of me, the fact that I was really struggling and having a hard time putting myself out there, I realized and learned that I had a lot of trauma that was unresolved, which is why that was what the brick wall was that I was slamming up with, a lot of trauma. And I had to look at it, and through compassion and through listening to what was going on there, that stuff was able to resolve. And then now my business is doing awesome and I feel a lot safer. So it was a really interesting experience.
Yeah, man, I can 100% relate to everything you said. Just in the interest of time, I'll just say ditto. That was definitely my experience. And the thing I think people need to understand is that it's not necessarily linear or logical the way that this comes to be. Because I was reflecting on my experience myself, and I'm seeing indications of real transformation and growth just in the past few months, where I used to cram as much as I possibly could within my work hours. And I told myself that if I didn't, fill in the blank with any one of the expletives that you said about yourself before, right? Like you're a fucking douchebag, you're a failure, you're soft, whatever. And now I know what I need to do every day. I'm really clear on that. And I've got this whole different system and approach to how I identify, well, what needs to absolutely get done today? And what do I need to complete in order to feel complete and really put things down? And sometimes I do that and I say, you know what? I don't feel like sitting at the computer anymore. I'm going to take these next 2 hours to spend a little more time with my family, or I feel like going for a second workout. Maybe I'll just go to the gym and get another quick, gentle workout in, or something that really feeds me. But I would never have listened to that part of myself a few months ago. It was so in that red zone. I was just seeing red. I was seeing red everywhere. And now so what I'm going back to saying is that those changes sometimes can be really subtle and almost imperceptible. But I've noticed that, oh, wow, that's actually happening. And I feel a lot differently in my body. We're about to move across the country to next week. And here I am like, yeah, that's a big deal, but feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. And what people tend to find, you mentioned earlier how these parts of us, these like stressed out, frightened, wounded, scared parts of us, angry parts of us, they live in different parts of our bodies. It's a weird thing. Whereas if you ask, where is that? Can you find that part in your body or around your body? Usually you're like, oh, it's in my chest, or oh, it's in my shoulders, or I feel it in my face or my jaw, stomach, all different places. And so these things really, these parts of us really have physiological responses in the body. And if you help them start to feel calmer and safer and more taken care of and more supported, like your own children kind of thing, your whole nervous system and your body and your experience of life just feels calmer. And it feels like those roadblocks, internal roadblocks to taking action or doing what's important to you, though they start to dissolve. And I've never seen it where it's like a light switch went up and now it's like that wall is completely gone. As you said, it's a gradual dialing down of the system. But and a big part of that is because these parts of us, they don't really trust us typically, because we have a long history of just like treating them very poorly. Typically, shut up, stop being like this. You should, you're not enough. Why are you ruining my life or blocking me or all these different things? If you start to listen to them, they start to be like, oh, you're going to pay attention to me now, but you don't have money trust built up with them that you're going to be loving to them. But if you start to like take care of them and listen to them and treat them well and be there for them, then they start to gradually trust you a little bit more. Oh, Jeddy's got my back, or oh, Jack's got my back. And so I guess maybe I can start to trust him. And then like a little more and a little more. And you gradually build up this like rock solid internal system where all the parts of ourselves, all those kids on the bus are like, we freaking got this. And then what you start to find is those parts they're really powerful. Like all of that energy that's pumping fear. When those parts don't have to do that anymore because they feel safe all of a sudden and that they're going to be taken care of, all of that tremendous energy that was like pumping into my nervous system, you fucking loser, what the fuck is wrong with you, around the clock, can go towards something really productive and really valuable. And then all of a sudden, that's like a superpower way of finding that we have tremendous energy in ourselves that can go towards really beautiful, amazing things. The more that we can align our nervous systems and take care of ourselves in a beautiful way.
Yeah, man. Oh, it's been so powerful, so impactful for me. And it's really an exploration, right? It's like you said, I love that you said it's not a light switch. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic potion that's going to just suddenly change years and years of dialogue and stories that we've been telling ourselves, but that there is a pathway through, and then it doesn't have to be so painful. And I think that's one thing I also learned from all this, is it doesn't always have to be painful. I don't have to put myself through more pain to heal some of my previous pain. It definitely requires courage. It definitely requires willingness to look at myself in a way that I haven't before, to challenge some of those kids on the bus that are fighting for their way. But just like you said, the patience and the time and the willingness to really sit with it is so important. And I know that we're just about at our time we have here. Do you have a little bit of time just to wrap up, to go beyond?
Absolutely. I certainly do.
Okay.
Though I guess just the one quick point I would just add in there around the self-compassion around that is just that a lot of people have this story of that self-compassion is like soft or weak. I'm going to become weak kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But just to put out there for people who feel that way, and it makes total sense that you feel that way. There's a society built up around, that telling that story. And I think it's gradually shifting, hopefully. But they've done a lot of research recently through the self-compassion, mindful self-compassion stuff, and found that actually people who are kinder to themselves tend to be more productive, which seems like is very paradoxical to what a lot of us think, but they tend to get more stuff done and go further. It's not 100% of the time. There's some people who are really hard on themselves who go pretty far, but overall, people who are gentler and kinder with themselves tend to be actually more productive. So that was really cool for me to hear.
Yeah, I remember you dropped that on me either last session that we had or maybe 2 sessions ago, and I believe it, and I found that to be true. But there's still a part of me that's really embracing it. Like, yeah, but when is the other shoe going to drop? So there's more work for me to do there, and I'm acknowledging that. Thank you for bringing that piece in. Sure. I definitely know that we could keep jamming on this for a while, but I want to respect your time. And I thought it would be pretty cool, since you've already been on here before. You've answered some of the lightning round questions that I usually ask. I thought I would just ask if you had a favorite story or a favorite memory, since you and I have so much history together, that you wanted to share briefly. Is there anything that comes to mind you want to drop in here before we wrap up?
uh, part of my mind was like, all right, what's like the wise anecdote? That could be great, kind of thing. But but I guess one thing that but I guess maybe this is the wise anecdote is that Jeddy and like the relationship that I share with him. One thing it was so meaningful to me, even more when we were, or just a lot when we were young, is it was so playful and fun and gleeful, and like I could just feel all the like stress and hard stuff of the world could kind of just disappear when we were just hanging out. And I just remember we were like going to get ready to go to like a club or party or something. And we would be like, all right, we got to power up. We got to power up before the night. And we would like do this funny thing where we would like grab each other's hands and then like start shaking like incredible amounts of energy were like pumping and surging through our nervous systems. And we would start spiraling around, and then we just start breaking like crazy dance moves. And then we were like, all right, now we're ready for the night.
Oh man,
it just made me happy. Just a lot of happiness.
Oh, that's such a good memory, man. Yeah, that brought up a lot of those moments. There's like these little landmarks in my mind of our power up moments. I remember we would also, not even just the beginning of the night, sometimes we'd be out in the midst of a beautiful adventure, sometimes at Burning Man, sometimes somewhere in the middle of New York City. And we would just catch eyes with each other, and one of us would call for a power up moment. And we would just do it wherever we were. We would just do it in the middle of where we were. And who knows? I didn't care. We didn't even care what people around us were thinking. We would have that moment, and it would just be so, like you said, so playful, so fun. It brings up a memory for me of, I guess it's probably 2013, because it was the first year that Carrie came to Burning Man with me. And I remember one night where you and your wife and Lennon and myself and Carrie, we were all together, and we had a beautiful night together, and we were just in the middle of the playa, and we had one of those moments. We had one of those power up moments. And I remember just for that section of several hours together, it was just so fun and memorable and silly, but then also the depth. For me, my greatest memories are just the range that we've had in our relationship, going all the way back to when I had no idea what I was doing with my life. And I'm just grateful for those memories, man. Super fun, super really special for me to just see how you have grown into a husband and a father and a business owner. It's like, man, I could have never imagined that about either of us when we were back to doing our power ups in the middle of the playa out there at Burning Man. But here we are, lo and behold.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's an amazing thing to see to be on the journey all together. And I think just talking about that memory is just reminding me of I think at least the medicine, one thing I'm taking with me, at least from this talk that we're having together here today, is just, I think in like being a dad now and being like just with business and stuff, I think I tend to lose track of just that carefree, beautiful, kind of joyous, being fun, being silly kind of experience. I want to try to like look for more of that in the days to come, because just thinking about that, I'm just feeling relief and smiles and the beauty of that. So I'm going to look for more of that in my day to day.
Yeah, man. I'll say one thing I've learned for myself is when we used to spend days and days together, right? Like we were roommates for a big chunk of our friendship. And it was the amount of time I was putting into our relationship back then is now been replaced by the time I put in with my wife and with my 2 kids. So I've had to learn to bring that playfulness into my family, which was not where I started off with. It was very serious. It was very stressful in the early stages of family life. And now my kids are my play buddies. You know, we do so many silly things, and we have so many moments that are not out there for anybody else to see, where we're dancing around and making silly faces at each other. And it's discovering new play partners. That's what's been really helpful for me. And it's also nice to just kind of be nostalgic and know that I can only play and be silly with my buddies in a way that we do that. And there's really nobody else in that. That just makes it really special too.
Definitely. Thanks for that nugget there about looking for that in the familial experience. I'm going to take that with me as well. Thank you.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, this has been such a great walk down memory lane, Jack. And I love that I got to highlight you and share you with the community in the Rising Man space, because you're such a gift, such a real gift, man. I want you to just take one last opportunity to tell people where they can connect with you, learn more about the opportunities and the offerings you have. So anything you want to say about links, websites, or places people should go to connect with you, go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Appreciate that. So I work as a coach and a counselor. My counseling website is jackrubincounseling.com. I also work with musicians. from a coaching perspective there. Holisticmusicianship.com is that. And actually, one aspect of my life right now that is like a newer endeavor, but I'm finding really passionate about, that I'll just put out there in case anyone is struggling out there, because I felt a tremendous amount of shame with it. So I had an experience when I was younger where I from the time I was 12 to 25, I was really struggling to use a bathroom in public restrooms. I was just like, my body would not release urine when I was in public bathrooms, and it was mortifying and stressful and huge shame in my life. I started working with people. I realized there's 20 million people worldwide estimated dealing with this issue. So I started helping people overcome that issue. And that's been a really amazing thing also, to help people not be plagued by that anymore. Gratefully, I was able to make it to the other side of that too. So that's overcomingshyBladder.com, that's called. And you can check out that if you know anyone struggling with that or yourself. So that's those are my offerings.
Awesome, man. Are you on any of the socials? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram where people can go find you too?
Not currently professionally speaking at this point in time, but you can certainly friend me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. Oh yeah, email jackstarrubin at gmail.com. JACKSTARRUBIN@gmail.com. Love to connect,
brother. Awesome, man. Well, it's good to see your face. Anytime we could sit down and have a conversation is a special one for me. And this time we get to capture it so that people all around the world can benefit from it, man. So thank you for your time. Look forward to seeing you whenever I get to see you, and lots of love to you, brother.
Jeddy, a tremendous honor as always.